would like to call on our President and Chairman of the Board of CFA Society Philippines, Dr. Robert Ramos, CFA, Kaya, CIPM.
Thank you, Rochelle. It's always a pleasure to welcome you for these events. I hope that everyone is well and keeping safe in the midst of this global pandemic, especially now during our current lockdowns. And I always say that I've always believed that even during these most trying times, every individual, any individual, can find ways to improve. Obviously, obtaining the CFA charter is one path to such improvement, while learning from the success stories of others is another path. In this career talk, I do hope that you pick up a lot of pointers on how you can traverse the road to self-improvement while scaling the corporate ladder. Thank you to our speaker, Melanie, for sharing your story. And thank you to all of you for attending this webinar. Have a good day. Rochelle?
Thank you, Sir Rob, for joining us today. I know you're a busy person, but you always take time to join us for our Career Guide webinars. It's been like 6 already, so this is the 7th, and you've been with us for that whole series. And I'd like to introduce now our moderator for today. Our moderator is a driven, highly quantitative and resourceful investment professional and data science enthusiast with experience in handling complex assignments that require expediency, insight, and attention to detail. Her core competencies include financial analysis, statistical analysis, fixed income research, risk and capital management, financial analysis, performance measurement, financial modeling, investment and portfolio management, data science, and forecasting. She is a CFA charter holder, and she has been our active volunteer. She's been active since she was a candidate, and in fact, even before pandemic, she would usually join us to help us with our live events. Let us please welcome Miss Melanie Day Awit, CFA.
Thank you for that really generous introduction, Ms. Rochelle. So today I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker, who also happens to be my friend. Our speaker carries almost 10 years of advisory experience in the Philippines. First, as one of the senior consultants leading the data science and analytics practice at Lift Solutions Incorporated. Second, as a financial consultant independently engaging with the World Bank and previously with the International Finance Corporation and the Asian Development Bank. And lastly, as a former investment banking officer with the Development Bank of the Philippines. Let us all welcome Ms. Mary Grace Bacus, CFA. Hi, Mary. I think you're on mute.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, classic mistake. Hope everyone's well. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. So nice to see you virtually, and very happy to have you here today. So as we all know, data science is fast becoming a relevant and exciting career across different industries, including finance. I'm sure our audience today is very keen to know more about your journey. So maybe to start, let's just start from the very beginning. Like, why did you pursue finance?
Actually interested to. I'm eager to hear as well. What is the mix of our attendees? What makes them interested in listening to this talk? But I hope that I'll be able to share my experience and my path towards this career. So, why did I pursue finance? I think immediately after I finished undergrad, which was applied mathematics, major in operations research, I joined a management training program, which has the goal of preparing me to become a bank officer for government institution. So, like many fresh grads, I had to step out of my comfort zone, which in my case was the safety of mathematical theorems and the precision of textbooks with well-defined problems and immediately applicable problem-solving algorithms. So I had to make a dramatic shift now from this world into a much messier reality of this interdisciplinary web of business, finance, economic, political, regulatory, and ethical context that a young financial professional or bank officer must immediately contend with. So this was the first time I saw the opportunity to help bridge the gap between the quantitative and the qualitative. So what I mean by that is that although I struggled to merge the two, I saw this challenge as an opportunity to derive synergies between these two worlds. That's why I dove deep into finance. So I've worked with DBT for almost 5 years, where I first experienced advising government clients on big ticket infrastructure projects. I eventually enriched this consulting experience with ZLIF Solutions Data Science team and independently, as you mentioned, as a financial consultant engaged in various multilateral institutions.
So that's very interesting, Mary. We actually have a similar, somewhat journey. Um, yeah, but I guess in relation to that, like, was there anybody who really influenced you to take on the finance field?
I think it was really more as a result of observing how people from different backgrounds fared in the management training program. So I saw where mathematicians had sort of a gap in understanding the concepts that were being taught to us. So we immediately had to stretch out ourselves beyond our comfort zones, and that's where I saw that maybe there's a way for me to capitalize on this gap and help
Mhm.
become one of the few people who can thrive in both worlds.
So in a way, you were finding your niche, right? So
Yeah.
it's like your unique selling proposition. So I've also noticed that you've done a lot of work in a variety of industries by now. So in relation to that, what do you consider your highest achievement in your career? And also, did the CFA membership, the network, the program, did it help you at all?
Mm. My personal metric for a high achievement is, I guess, being able to continually expand myself so I can help others do the same, such as my clients, and of course, help them chart a roadmap towards their objectives. So I think based on that metric, my highest achievement so far might be actually just getting to practice this consulting role in both data science and finance, as well as being able to train and hopefully influence people in positions to change the game in their own sectors. So, data science, I already been mentioned a lot, is indeed a heavy loaded term. So, it's currently fashionable to take interest in, but for me, there's a real need across many industries to gain data driven insights from their data and to make smarter decisions to this discipline. So, interdisciplinary field. And data science merges domain expertise with mathematical and statistical knowledge, diba? And programming skills, among others. So, the CFA curriculum was practically my first introduction into the merging of two or more disciplines. So, it covered not only quantitative methods and financial analysis, but also economics, behavioral finance, and even financial reporting standards, among other topics most relevant to investment professionals. So it also taught me the humility and, of course, discipline needed to self-learn. As growing up, I was always curious, but could certainly have been more diligent.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're right. The CFA curriculum is very, very diverse, especially level one, right? That's where we get to really see, okay, the CFA is not just technically about finance. It's really about a variety of fields that you can use within the industry of finance. Yeah, that's very interesting. So, um, I guess we can move on to how you were able to move from finance and into a career in data science. You know, it's very hard to find work in the Philippines that allows you to do both finance and data science. It's not necessarily straightforward. And I'm sure the jump wasn't, um, um, I guess, a
So
straight line, right? It wasn't a straight it's the path towards that career wasn't a straight line. So how were you able to achieve that role, and how do you see your career path moving forward?
I think what I've done is actually just become open to learning opportunities and becoming a part of different communities, like the CFA Society and different groups that are enthusiasts for a certain open source programming language like R. So what I've done is draw on these communities and in my drive to learn from different disciplines. So I learned a lot from researching and working with an awesome group of physicists, mathematicians, statisticians, and business consultants. So, and to further manage my career as a consultant in both industries, I also had to acquire some client or industry specific knowledge, diba? Since I am not on any social media platform, I try to build my brand by sincerely empathizing with my clients, with the needs of those who hire me for advice. So far, gaining credibility, even with this small immediate circle of influence, has been somewhat effective in developing trust and perpetuating my relevance and opening opportunities for more consulting engagements. So that's how I got here. I started from smaller projects and a smaller team, and then eventually I enriched my experience to my experience with ZLift and my independent consulting engagements.
So I know it's really just about exposing yourself, right? Getting to join small groups that are interested in the same things and potentially getting opportunities in those groups.
Mhm.
For our listeners here who are really interested to get into a career in data science, are there specific groups that you recommend they check out, or specific events that they check out?
Yeah, about to start in a few minutes is a meetup of the R users group. So it's an active community of practitioners and sometimes new entrants to the industry. Of course, there is opportunity to gain long-term relationships with possible mentors if you join such groups. And of course, resources will also be made available by attending these events. You can also try to seek scholarship to for online courses, which actually offer if you write your justifications for asking for the scholarship.
Is this
So that's what,
Coursera?
yeah, that's what I did before when I was starting to learn program R again.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's really um, that's low hanging fruit, right? That everybody can avail of.
Mm,
And I guess another thing that would be interesting to cover was how did you make your career decisions? I, like imagine you're in finance for 5 years, and then that meant leaping into data science, right?
mm,
How did you decide? Okay, um, I'm gonna leave finance where I have a lot of experience in, and then now I move to a completely new field. I mean, at least during that time, right? It was
mm,
a completely new field,
mm.
and it must have taken a lot of guts to
Yeah.
to make the jump.
Right, right. It felt like leaving because it was such an uncharted territory. To go into data science at the time when all I've done for a few years was banking and financial advisory. So, but that's the path I've always chosen, which is a path that challenges and pushes me to learn new disciplines. So, not really to be in front of the curve, but to keep growing and keep being excited with what I'm doing. So, in case it's not yet obvious, I'm also motivated by opportunities to collaborate with like minded people who I can learn from, which I get to have in my data science consulting job. Also, I choose to engage in government advisory projects of multilaterals mainly because they expose me to diverse teams of very experienced professionals. So in both consulting roles, the projects are rarely straightforward and mostly complex. But that's exactly what motivated me to take on these roles. So it's more of a story of merging two worlds rather than leaving one world for
Mm,
another.
uh-huh. Uh-huh. I agree. And I guess you mentioned earlier as well that being a data scientist requires a ton of skills, right? You need to know programming, you need to have a sense of business domain. You also need to know statistics, modeling, um, a bunch of, concepts.
Mhm.
But if you were starting in data science, what do you think are the skills that will set you apart from other candidates? What are the basic skills and what are the skills that would definitely give you an edge?
Yeah. Um, Top of mind, critical thinking, no? Um, any non-trivial decision requires reasoning. So that should help, along with other 21st century skills if one hopes to contribute to the data science community. So you should learn to collaborate and to articulate in the language of your clients. So do not limit yourself to your strongest front or to your natural abilities. So, and you must also acknowledge your weaknesses so you can address them, diba? And of course, embrace new challenges, but be courageous to face failure because it's not always a success story, right? And
Mm,
last but not the least, I think that we should all try to seek mentorship from the right people surrounding us.
I think that's a very, very good tip to highlight, Mary, because whenever people talk about data science, it's about the hard technical skills. But at the
Mm,
end of the day, to be really successful and effective, you need to have the soft skills down. That's how you become an effective consultant. So, I mean, we know that you've had a good number of years doing advisory, but is there something that you wish you knew early on, right from the very beginning? I know at the end of the day we learn from our mistakes and we it's just part of the journey. But if there was something that you wish you knew, what would that be?
mm. I guess I wish I'd known that I'd be establishing my brand as a professional in every touch point or interaction that I have with others in the profession. So if I had that in mind early on, I'd have exerted much more effort much earlier in the game to make myself more well-rounded and more conversant in matters outside of my own nerdy interests.
Yeah, I think people from the field of math or the sciences tend to have a very focused approach to the more technical
Yeah.
items, right?
We get carried away sometimes.
That's very, very true. And I think yeah, I wish the same as well. Wish I knew that as well. But okay, so maybe we can zero in to what you currently do, especially in your role as a consultant in Zlift Solutions, and possibly a little bit also as an independent consultant for finance for the World Bank. What exactly do you do? What does the work involve, and how did the CFA program help you in these things or these tasks that you have to carry on day to day?
Mhm. Um, I am a principal analytics consultant at Zilip Solutions at the moment, where I get to lead data science and analytics teams in designing and delivering data-driven solutions to clients from government and other sectors like utilities, airline, healthcare, retail, finance, and etc. So to perform my role, I apply different sorts of skills, so a combination of business analysis, mathematics, OR, operations research, and statistical approaches. So indeed, as I mentioned earlier, data science is an interdisciplinary field. And my first intro to merging multiple disciplines was the CFA curriculum, which not only included quantitative techniques like time series analysis, but also provides enough foundational knowledge in economics, finance, and investment, diba? Not to mention confidence and credibility to a finance professional. So, um, as a financial consultant who's independently engaged by multilaterals to help in advising policymakers and government agencies on the risk allocation and valuation of infrastructure projects, what I do is I draw on my learnings from the CFA curriculum, uh, especially on financial forecasting and discounted cash
Yeah.
flow analysis. Kind of basic, but it's what usually used when it comes to these consulting engagements. So like right now or recently, I was part of the team that advised the government on the assessment of fiscal risks uh, of their project due to the post COVID situation.
Those are very, very interesting projects, Mary. Very varied and I think very, very relevant, right? These are projects that definitely have an impact to the businesses that you or the clients that you cater to, and also to the government. Um, I guess now we can also talk about. Um, I mean, both of us we've taken the CFA maybe a few years back, right? Do you think it's still a relevant certification to have, given the current global context, the current situation of the country, the demand uh, in different fields,
Mm.
and uh, do you have tips for people who are currently candidates in the CFA program?
Uh, Okay, I'll start with the tips because I have no preparation advice other than that your effort will be worth it since the CFA program's relevance outlives the exam preparation timeline. So you will still stand to gain from many of your learnings years down the line. Um, but in terms of the relevance of the CFA exam, no, yeah, it consolidates and updates the relevant body of knowledge for investment professionals, diba? It sets a high bar for industry practitioners and, of course, encourages us to be more cognizant of ethical standards and best practices. So we want to be part of this community. And if you have the opportunity to do so, then why not try it?
Okay, yeah. I guess now we can move on. You've mentioned ethics a lot, right? Was there any situation in your career where you had like an ethical dilemma, and did the CFA help you navigate or maneuver um, that dilemma?
Okay. I'm probably one of many practitioners in the data science and analytics industry who have had to judge or determine if startups aiming to bring technologies to market actually make proper use of social media and other data for their own objectives. So this is kind of gray area because and then the high bar for ethical decision making set by the CFA program actually inspired me to understand that the challenge goes beyond the algorithms and that we should protect the trust and the privacy of the public as well as our clients, diba? We should check for data imbalances and increase model explainability to mitigate undesired biases in our statistical studies and analytics models. So we should integrate um, ethical practices in our models. So that's
It's
kind of
very
scary.
interesting that you were able to apply the things we learn in the CFA in a completely different field, right? But yeah, I guess it's a really tough job and an interesting job as well.
Yeah.
Um, so I know that technically speaking, your job in DBP was probably the most relevant in terms of investment management. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it was a while ago as well.
So I guess I mean, only if you can think of anything, are there also some factors that you think are most critical to succeeding in that particular industry?
I'd certainly defer to the ones who have years of experience in the
Mhm.
profession, but what might be able to comment on is a relevant factor needed to succeed in as a financial professional in general, diba? Which for me is, I guess, having a data-driven strategy. So maybe that's also applicable to investment management, diba? You have to have a strategy that is attuned to the business context and objectives of your client and makes full use of all information available to you.
Very, very good tip. So I guess um, the interview is about to get to wrap up. Any parting words for those who are interested in pursuing data science? Any tips, things to watch out for?
Um, Only pursue a career in data science if you have a genuine interest in the available literature or resources, diba? Or in the methodologies or in the skills needed to contribute to the field. So I think it's not enough to ride on the uh, bandwagon, and you should pick one or two the main expertise relevant to where you may be right now, that you can aim to build on. So I guess that's those are my 2 cents.
Okay, so thank you so much, Mary. I think you were able
Thank
to
you.
cover a lot of topics, um, and your background particularly is very interesting because it's a combination of finance, investment management, and data science. So before the webinar started, we were able to field a couple of questions in advance, and reminding everyone that feel free to send your questions in as we start the question and answer portion. So right down below, we have the chat box. If it's okay, please indicate your full name, your organization, or the organization you're from, and then your question. So first is, what specific finance roles do you think can benefit from learning data science and how?
I can think of one. If you're a research analyst, and you're following industries, of course, if you're in both fundamental analysis and technical analysis, of course, it requires an understanding of patterns and data. So learning the basic methodologies and the foundational knowledge behind data science concepts would be very fruitful uh, for these sort of professionals. If you're just if you're an investment manager or handling a portfolio of diversified assets, no, you can apply different techniques based on the data available to you historically and assess the covariations of the cash flows of your investment so that you are able to assess how they're going to move together in the future or given certain scenarios.
So the optimal curve, if I if I
Yeah.
remember correctly.
Yeah, it's not just a data science concept, diba? It's a basic portfolio management concept which can draw a lot from information. So just use all the data that's available for that study or objective.
Yeah, I think if you know data science, right, it's easier to apply these theoretical concepts you learn in the CFA because you can program them and apply them practically in the real world. Okay, so another question here is for someone interested in both data science and financial services, what would be a great starting point um, in their career? Like, where do you think they should start? I guess.
Um, uh, I was so luckiest to find a post where I was paid to learn, to be trained. So in both cases, actually, when I started with finance, I was a management trainee. When I started with data science, I was given a few months to shadow other consultants and learn the craft. So if you can find a spot in the industry where there is a lot of opportunity for learning, then you can't go wrong with that.
So either is fine, just look for
Yeah,
where the opportunity is.
yes, of course.
Okay, so we're down to our last question, but everyone feel free to send in your question. It's really good to have an expert in this call, and if I were you guys, I would definitely take the opportunity to ask more questions. So, what does data science have to do with business? This is a more generic question, and I think it's to get a longer or a more an answer that's more subjective, right? So, yeah, what does data science have to do with business?
or creative.
Creative, yeah.
But it's a very good question that that not a lot of people actually ask, but I know that they have that in mind, especially the people that sit with us in meetings. I really want this sort of questions to be asked upfront, because I really want to get them invested in the project that we have in mind. So if you're in business, you generate a lot of information from it. So, for example, when you sell a product, the data that you would get from that is the volume that you're selling, the price you sold it to, et cetera, and the type of product that and the type of client that you're selling it to. So, these information have become ubiquitous over time, as and very prevalent in the business context, such that different players in the same industry could actually be competing against each other, trying to find their edge against others by drawing on these data to generate insights that help them make smarter decisions. So, data science is the one that actually helps businesses transform these information into something meaningful and actionable. So, uh, uh, it's actually entirely about business, diba? But of course, data science is
Mm.
applications to the academe.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. So I think a lot of businesses are moving away from, okay, this is a decision based on my gut feeling.
Yeah.
Now, more data-driven decisions. Yeah, okay. So I'm not sure if we have any other questions. Let me just check.
May I know? I'm seeing one from the chat box.
Oh, okay. There are two now, I think. So first, so there's somebody who's in a very different um basically his situation is the reverse. So he's saying, I'm an IT professional trying to shift to a finance related data science field.
Hmm.
What's the best way to gain exposure?
Um, Let me sit on that for a while. IT professional, and your goal is to be able to apply data science in a in the finance industry now.
Yeah, finance
Uh,
related data science field. Yeah.
okay. Find a company that packages or positions itself as a data driven institution. So I've seen that in different industries, there are those who actually are in the front lines of that kind of strategy. So if you can find a company like that, you will find you'll fill in a lot of roles, uh, especially when they're trying to build their data science team. As an IT professional, maybe you have some data management background or expertise which they can draw on. And then if you want to be in the field of finance, maybe it can be a bank. So
Mhm.
it's very specific that I think of, but there are actually banks that are positioning themselves as the leaders in data driven um, tools or services.
Yeah, there are a few off the top of my head, so I know what you mean, Mary. Okay, so yeah, that's a good answer. Another question is, before we go on to the question on the screen, what typical position in a company will allow you to get started in data science? What courses should I take to get started in data science when I have no prior coding knowledge? This is from Paul Cirillo.
What particular position in a company? Okay, I'll just draw from my experience. Okay, my journey into data science actually didn't immediately start with me. Oh, I want to learn regression analysis. It actually started with a need for me to process a lot of information and to be very quick in deriving insights out of them to find patterns, meaningful patterns that will drive our decision making. So I was so it for me it really didn't matter that I was in that particular in my particular what we call
Oh.
this, rank or position. But what mattered more was that I had to use information, a lot of data, and had to learn to derive insights out of them. So it actually compelled me or to learn these data science techniques, the very basic ones at the very start,
Mhm.
to process this information. Sorry, what was the rest of the question again?
The other part of the question was, what courses should I take to get started in data science when I have no prior coding knowledge? I guess Paul is coming from the idea that a lot of the data science courses out there are geared towards learning R, Python, etc.
Right. I think a business econ course, or any course that merges statistical or applies mathematical techniques to real world problems or real world data sets would ease you into the sort of mindset and skill set needed to do data science. So if of course you can also go the usual route of doing taking a mathematical course, because of course, for example, even if your course is very mathematical and just teaches you to apply algorithms to execute numerical approaches towards a certain problem, it actually trains you to start having an algorithmic thinking
Mm.
that's actually needed to craft solutions, data science solutions for a certain real world problem. So, but of course, it's usually a bigger gap if you start with a mathematical course. That's why I said maybe you can try a business econ course
Course to begin
or
with.
some or applied math.
Applied math, yeah. Um, so you were saying that it's not about the role, right? Basically, a role that allows you to deal with a lot of data is probably a good starting point
Mm-mm.
for a data science career. As long as you get access to this sort of data, it's probably easier to apply data science techniques. And then as for the course, there's the business econ route, and then of course math, which is probably foundational because you learn a lot of logic, right? When you take on math. Yep. And another question, we have two more in the chat box. First, from Shakina. I hope I'm saying that right. May I know the specifics of how you learned data science? I just started learning basic Python, but I'm kind of lost.
Yeah. I guess uh, to start trying to break down that question, diba? How I learned data science. I did not learn data science just by learning programming. So there are a lot of skills that needed to be learned to do the field, to be part of the field. So practically, how I learned data science is to be part of a data science team and to actually have to handle or address a real life business problem through the use of data. So, well, in terms of programming, if you wanted to ask the specifics of how I learned to code, it actually started with an appreciation of what we call that, al- um, sort of a set of steps. So a code is practically a set of steps, diba? So it's an algorithm. So Python and R and other programming languages just provide us the syntax to implement these algorithms. But actually, what fueled my learning and continuous learning of these programming languages is a strong understanding of these methodologies and how they should work. Diba? So it's not enough to just learn a language, its syntax. You should actually learn the point behind an algorithm and how it's supposed to work. So, for example, you're going to apply a certain technique like linear regression. You should be able to understand how it fits an
I
equation
like,
to a
yeah, yeah.
certain data set. Diba? So you are able to, for example, interpret the residuals of your model.
Yeah. Yeah, you make a very good point, Mary. I think for us who's really started with math, right, that's what fueled going into data science. But a lot of people just think it's about coding.
Or copy pasting from Stack
Stack
Overflow.
Overflow.
Uh, yes, but it's not. It's actually more than that. You're gonna have to judge or to choose among different methodologies or to craft a very specific solution to a certain problem. So it will require a lot of appreciation of the business problem that you have before you.
Yeah, something I also heard while listening to a podcast before was the best way to learn something is really through transfer learning, where basically you're learning, let's say, data science and you apply it to a field that you already care about. So,
Exactly.
yeah, if you're in the utilities industries, apply it there, etc.
Yeah, and vice versa. If you're already very good with programming and math, or you can just try to expand yourself in a by just choosing an industry that interests you.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we have one more question, and everyone's. I think we still have a good amount of time for questions, so feel free to send more questions in. We have a question from Earl Christian Yu, a student from Ateneo. So, finance and data science seems like a really good career path, but is there demand here in the Philippines, especially for fresh grads?
Uh, there's a demand to be part of a data science team. So right now, as a fresh grad, you can't immediately be a data scientist. Unfortunately, it takes time. It takes years. I don't consider myself a full blown or a data scientist at all, diba? So I consider myself a part of a data science team, which is a mix of different skills that's needed to address a certain problem and through a data science and analytics solution. So, uh, as a fresh graduate, maybe with um, you can start with a role where you are learning more from others or learning by being a part of a team that's already doing data science analysis on financial data. So I'm sure there's an opportunity for that as long as you know that you're not trying to fill a data scientist role. You're trying to be part of a team, and then eventually you will grow to contribute more as you learn along the way.
It's a very nuanced answer, Mary, and I think yeah, you're right. That's probably one of the easier ways to go about it. Um, are there any other questions from the group?
Good luck, Earl.
Yeah, good luck, Earl.
Yeah, there is a demand here in the Philippines, just to answer that question. But of course, there are differences in the roles that you can take to fill in that demand.
I guess that was a more difficult question to answer like back in the day, right? When data science wasn't even really that popular. I personally wanted to get into quant finance roles immediately being a math finance graduate and then finding out okay, these opportunities these don't actually exist in the market yet.
There's
But
no market.
there's no market yet. But I think today that's probably less of a concern than it was like during our time.
Yeah, it's not confined to the usual instruments actually. Finance covers a wide industry, diba?
Yep, yep. Okay, we have one more question. Oh, two more questions. One from Marvin Bulahan. I'm from New Era University, and I would like to ask if our country is still degree centric, even in the field of data science.
Okay, this is what I can answer based on experience. So in my role as part of the data science team, as part of Zilip's data science team, I had the opportunity to to help judge applicants based on their qualifications and their skills. So what we actually use as the primary basis for qualifying them is their performance in our technical assessment. So we're no longer degree centric. I dare say, based on that, because we have a more quantifiable or data driven basis for selecting an applicant.
Yep. I think outside of the Philippines, that's also what's happening, right?
Yeah.
People are being more focused on the actual ability to potentially like code or break a problem down
Yeah.
into actionable pieces, etc.
And of course, the soft skills don't actually correlate closely correlate with degree, diba? So these are things that are hard to just assume based on a single metric, which is your school.
Okay, I think we're on to our last question. So, a question from Perry Ang. Thank you for the interesting talk. Just curious what you think are the advantages of a data science practitioner who has finance and CFA background versus from a non-finance background, especially since most data science roles are not from the finance field per se.
Mm. Uh, I Let me just try to preface this with um, it's hard for me to narrate to package this as an advantage over data science practitioners with non-finance background. But I think from the context of having a domain expertise on top of um, your programming, mathematical, statistical know-how, of course, it makes you into a more holistic team, 'di ba? Or part of the team to who's able to empathize with the requirements of your client. So you have to be able to translate or understand and translate the business requirements of your clients, and then reformulate them into analytics problems. So sometimes I draw on my financial background. Oftentimes, I draw on what I learned from the CFA program and my financial training when I'm trying to empathize with the business requirements of my clients. So that's really a great boost for me personally.
Yeah, I think because we have the idea of different industries in the CFA and potentially like ultimately the companies care about their bottom line, right? And that's
Mhm.
not very apparent to people in purely data science
Yeah.
backgrounds. But since we have that perspective, it's easier to say, okay, this is why this should matter to you.
Yeah, and you get to see the big picture, diba? Rather than just worry about your part of the problem to solve.
Hmm. Hmm.
So being able to see the end, to have the end in mind, will actually help you become agile to new constraints or different scenarios that are different complexities that you will have to consider in formulating the solution to a certain problem.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's all we have, Mary. Thank you very much. This was a very interesting and helpful conversation. Also, very nice catching up with you.
Thanks,
Um,
Mary.
thank you. Back to you, Miss Rochelle.
Thank you, Mel and Mary. We will well, that's the end of our session for today. That concludes our webinar.